joins us speaking to Dr. Andy Graham, who is the Executive Dean of the Research and Graduate School at the University of Bolton. Good morning, how are you today?
Morning, Lyndsey. Fine, thank you. It's a nice bright day, isn't it? So
it is in your house. In my house, I live in a cave. You wouldn't know what's going on out there. If I open those blinds, the mirrors will just be all shiny.
And it'll dazzle me because I'm looking straight at them from here. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much for agreeing to talk.
No, it's a pleasure, Lyndsey.
I know you're really busy. So, as you are aware, I'm talking to lots of different academics at the University of Bolton regarding your educational journey.
Oh.
So it's a nice wide question. How has your educational journey been for you? Thinking about when you sort of started back in high school or before, how did you find education?
There's an old joke there, isn't it? How did I find education? My parents took me to school on the first day. But anyway, that's a very old joke.
That's a really good point, though.
Yeah. I started off, if you want to go right back to the beginning, at a county primary school in Manchester, in South Manchester, and probably some of the best years of my life. I thoroughly enjoyed primary school, everything we did. Remember, there was no such thing as a national curriculum then. Reading ages were tested every 6 months by, sitting down with the headmaster as he was then, and they did standardized reading things with you. My reading age was always above my physical age, so, really good. Then I left primary school, went to a secondary school, a state comprehensive in South Manchester, in Chorlton. Very good education in my view. I can still remember 3 or 4 of the teachers that we had there. Now, that means they must have made an impression on me, a positive impression. And to this day, I can remember what they did, how they did it, and thinking back the way they talked to, let's face it, kids under the age of 16, we were actually treated almost as equals by the staff, the good staff there. And really, my secondary journey is boring because I thoroughly enjoyed it. I mean, it was a great time, really.
That's not boring. I love the fact that
some people have a bit of a tumultuous time, and it even gets worse than that, because I can remember sitting down, I must have been 15, with a careers teacher, and they said to me, "So what is it you want to do when you leave school?" So I said, "Oh, it's very clear. I'm going to stay on in the sixth form," because schools had sixth form. I'm doing my A-levels, go on to university, and I'm doing electrical and electronic engineering.
Wow. Did you have that very clear in your head at that age?
From the age of, probably, if I'm being truthful, about 12.
Really? Where did that come from?
Well, you see, nobody really knows. My father was an engineer, a toolmaker, so, precision engineering. And I'd grown up, I suppose, with engineering all my life. But I'd got an interest, I don't know how, but in the electrical and electronic side of things. Now, I had an uncle who ran his own electrical business. He was an electrician. So, I had another uncle that was a commercial, industrial electrician working for Northwest Water. So I suppose somewhere in the family there was, I don't know, but there was something there. But nobody told me to do this or anything. I mean, my dad used to say to me, because he used to go into work with him occasionally on a Saturday morning to have a mooch round and see what was going on. And he used to say to me, "I'll stay out of mechanical engineering. Whatever you do, stay out of it. It's a horrible industry," which I don't think it was really, but I can understand where he'd come from, because he'd done an apprenticeship. He'd left school at 14 and worked his way up. So somewhere in that, I got to the notion of electrical and electronic engineering for me. And it got worse than that, because I was actually interested in communications side of electrical and electronic engineering. Wow. Now, this is weird, and there's no known explanation for this. But I can remember that meeting, and the careers teacher just looked at me and she said, "Well, there's nothing I can do for you then, is there really?" So
you had a really easy appointment for
you. Yeah, exactly, yeah. So that was it, 15 minutes. Gone, yeah. So then I stayed on and did my A-levels.
What did you study?
Chemistry, physics and maths.
Oh my gosh. Easy subjects then.
Yeah. I didn't do brilliantly well, actually, but
How do you determine brilliantly well? By your results
Or
where it took you?
And well, yeah, okay. Where it took me, I'm very happy with. No problem about that. But the results at the time were not good. Now, what happened to me was a bit peculiar, and this was what might interest people. I'd applied to various universities and really wasn't that impressed. Went to open days in the days when you used to get time off at the drop of a hat from your studies to go and do an open day, spend your time drinking in the student union and experiencing that, really.
That's important.
The place that actually impressed me the most was Manchester Polytechnic, which is now Manchester Metropolitan University.
Yes.
And it impressed me because the staff were engaged with industry and business. The staff were actually willing to talk to us as prospective students, whereas at the universities, you didn't actually meet the staff. There were no staff there. It was research assistants or admin staff that were taking you around, or other students. And they were actually willing to talk to you about your interests and what you were doing. So I applied in the end to Manchester Poly. That's what I wanted to do. The BSc honours electrical electronic engineering. And in those days, everybody was called for an interview. You had to have an interview, it was mandatory. And I can even remember the guy who interviewed me, Professor Norman Burrows, who went to UCLan and saw his days out at UCLan. And there's another interesting twist there, because he's actually a personal friend of Peter Myler, who works in engineering at Bolton. Anyway, so he interviewed.
Makes sense, don't they?
Yeah.
Degrees of separation, that you always know somebody somewhere.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. And so he interviewed me, and at the end of it, he said, "Yes, I'm going to offer you a place on our degree." Oh, made up with that. When the offer came through, he'd made me 2 offers.
Oh.
He'd made me an offer for the degree, conditional, and an unconditional offer for their HND.
Okay.
Right. So I thought, that's a strange thing to do. But in the interview, he said to me, "So what are your interests really in electrical and electronic engineering? It's a broad field." So I said straight away, communication systems engineering. "Oh, what do you know about it?" So I told him what I knew about it. So he pulled a piece of paper out of his drawer and he wrote down, he said, "Right, I want you to contact this person at Granada Television. And I want you to, send them a nice letter, tell them that you've got offers from here, and what you're interested in, and take it from there." So I thought, that's a strange thing to do.
Yeah.
So I did. I wrote a letter to this personnel officer at Granada Television. I got called in for an interview.
Wow.
I didn't really know what this was about, because nothing had been advertised other than this piece of paper. And anyway, it ended up with, they offered to sponsor me throughout my degree. Now, my degree was going to be a 4-year, what we now call a thick sandwich degree. So, the 3rd year is spent in industry, but following an approved training program. Anyway, my levels weren't brilliant, and the Poly couldn't accept me on the degree, but they accepted me on the HND.
Okay.
And I did 1 term on the HND, and we had to take exams. And at the end of the exams, I got a call from the Poly to come in. So you're thinking, oh no, what's happening now? Oh no. And they said, "We're going to transfer you onto the 1st year of the degree."
Wow.
What? Yes. Your results are this, and we want to transfer you into the 1st year of the degree. How do you feel about that?
Yay.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's, what a silly question, really. So they said, but because there is a slight difference in what's been done over this 1st term on the 1st year of the degree and the HND, you're going to have to do some extra classes that we put on for you. Are you willing to do it? So I said, well, yeah, do they fit in the week? What happens? Anyway, you ended up doing, for another term, you were straight into the 1st year of the degree, doing all the normal lectures and doing these extra classes. And that's the way I ended up with my degree. And I was sponsored throughout the whole degree.
Wow.
Now, to this day, I maintain that it is the old polytechnics that were in such close contact with industry that was the way forward. That fitted me. It fitted, I think, what we now call learning styles, although that's discredited. But, it was very clear I had people that were lecturing me who'd come from industry, had got good academic qualifications, etc. So that's influenced me for the rest of my life, if that makes sense, because I wouldn't hear a bad word said about the polytechnics. And since then, what we now call the post-92s, of which Bolton is one, I won't really have a word said against them, because Bolton never took the title Polytechnic when it could have done, and it should have done. But you know that the staff that you've met are, willing to talk to people, willing to engage with people. They're not generally not standoffish staff. And that's a peculiarity, I think, of post-92 institutions, in my experience. So that's kind of in a nutshell, my educational background. Now, I then went into, I didn't stay with Granada at the end of it because, quite frankly, I had enough of watching television after 4 years. So I went into a company in Cheshire that did data systems for radio, which was way ahead of its day. So we were doing a lot of work for the old gas board. So, you'd phone up and say, my gas boiler's broken, can you come and repair it? And they'd log it on a computer, and then they'd radio up a van and say, can you visit such a body at this address? And well, we implemented the first systems for East Midland Gas and then North West Gas, where the stuff on the computer could be transmitted straight to the van and a printout. And the driver could respond on a keypad saying, job received, job completed, or whatever. And if it was emergency, you could press a button that said time on scene. So that was logged automatically because that's a legal requirement. So I ended up working there. And while I was doing that, one of our senior bosses at the company was on the governors of Mid Cheshire College in Northwich. And they needed somebody to teach part-time in the evening microelectronic systems to HNC students. So he came and he asked me, would you be interested? And I thought, never thought about it, but yeah, I'll go along and see what they want. Anyway, I ended up doing it.
Wow.
And I realised I actually enjoy this because the people I was meeting, were all employed, and I'd come from that background, and I loved it. And then I moved to another college, promotion to senior lecturer, and then I did my teacher training at Bolton, and then there was a job. It never left, and I ended up in teacher training at Bolton. Now I'll pause there, Lyndsey, because one of my problems is I can talk for England without pausing for breath. So I will stop now and let you interrupt, and then I'll carry on.
That's just so amazing how it's all fallen for you.
Yeah, very lucky. I mean,
now I always take I always have a problem with the word luck, because I think there's an element of luck in everything we do, but you work hard and you get noticed. You didn't get called into the Polytechnic after that first term through luck. That was through your exam results, and that was through what they'd seen.
Yeah.
So true. I do think there's always an element of luck in things that we do, being in the right place at the right time. But I think it's through sheer hard work as well.
I think looking back on it, you're right. Obviously, I put the effort in, and really I knew that this was a potential. I knew that the Poly did operate this scheme, and I knew I wanted to get a degree if I could. Because although I was the first in the family, well, other than a distant cousin who'd been to university and studied human resource management, I was the first kind of in the immediate family to go to university. But it's interesting, my parents were absolutely mad keen on education, and they'd not got a degree or anything, but they were mad keen on it and saw the importance of it. There was no pressure ever brought to bear on me, but heck of a lot of support.
Yeah. So
they knew I wanted to get to a degree, so this was a way through it for me. There was a hiccup at the A levels, and I got through to degree. Yes. So yeah, looking back on it, obviously I did put some effort in, obviously, but at the time, as you say, it feels like, gosh, this is all falling right for me at this time.
Yeah, of course. How important do you think it is that universities have that link to business, like you were talking with the polytechnics?
Honestly, I think it's critical. I think it gets very philosophical, this, doesn't it? there's always the argument about education versus training. What are universities about? They're about education. But if we're being honest, a large proportion of people who come to university see it as a means to getting on the ladder for employment, I think. So there has to be an element of training in there, but not at the expense of the education. And I think the way that you tackle that is by having staff who are engaged with industry and business and can bring in things like industry projects for students to work on during the final years, or the kind of thing I'm talking about, bringing an idea that's come from business or commerce, that why don't we try this, why don't we look at this in our teaching. I think it's critical. From my background, I mean, remember, we're going back a bit now, but I moved to a college where we had an old, I was teaching on the Ordinary National Diploma, and people watching this may say, what's one of them? Well, look it up online and look at, Wikipedia will tell you what an Ordinary National Diploma is. Fantastic qualification. It was the equivalent of more than 3 A levels at the end of it, and most universities would take you straight into a degree with an OND. Excellent. And I said there was a bit of a hiccup here for me, because had I realised when I was teaching people on the OND what was an OND, I would not have done A levels. I would have done the OND, definitely.
Right, okay.
Because it was all related. You did an OND in electrical engineering, for instance, so it was related to the area you wanted to go into. Yeah. So now, once I knew that, that's what I would have done. But I can remember teaching on that, and we were asked to teach things that were so out of date, because it was BTEC before Pearson took over. And I said, no, we've got to modernise this. So I'll tell you what, fax machines, they've just come in. How does a fax machine work? I haven't got a clue. So I phoned up Canon.
You need to explain what fax machines are to some people.
Yeah. 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 Well, you can watch that podcast then. I'll not repeat that. But yeah, I phoned up Canon and got through to some technical representative. And the next thing, Canon turned up in force in the college and set up a telephone exchange with several fax machines. And we got, I think there's about 50 students in there, and they spent an afternoon showing them how fax machines worked, the systems, then stripping them apart to show them the mechanics of it. And then another guy was taking them through the software involved in this. This was at OND level. So kind of that's always been important to me, that you've always had that link with industry, and it pays dividends. I can remember setting students a task on a traffic light simulation, which had to be all programmed in what they call machine code. And 2 students nearly got arrested because they went to where they were, I think it was Siemens or GEC, was setting up some new traffic lights in Trafford. And it was actually a building site, effectively. They wandered onto it to find the guys from GEC or Siemens and said, excuse me, can we pick your brains? What are you doing on here? You're not supposed to be on here. If you don't leave now, we'll call the police, this, that, and the other. Anyway, in the end, they said, no, this is what we've been set as a project. They ended up sitting down in the crew van at lunchtime with the guys, and they were going through the specification I'd given them, and they were giving them a clue on how it would be implemented for real.
Wow.
Now, I know I'm drifting slightly off the point here, but that's why I'm passionate about things like at Bolton advisory boards, industrial advisory boards, as we call them, in all areas. Yeah. In psychology, you can have an advisory board of people from, counselling, mental health, and so on. But I think it's really important. Yes, I think it's to everybody's benefit. I'll stop again, Lyndsey.
No, I think you're really right. I'm just thinking about the people I've learned from the most. It's the ones who give you those real life experiences. Yes. Or we had a guy on our psychology course who came in. He's actually the psychologist for referees, the FA referees. Yeah. And it was just so engaging because I think he was out there. He was doing it. He was that real life example. And I know, I think that's really important. I think that's how you you learn, and I guess you know what you want to be yourself when you grow up.
Well, yeah, and I think, when I came to Bolton, I was asked to come in and join the teacher education team. That we had a separate campus at that time, but I was responsible for everybody that was training to be an engineer, a lecturer in universities, colleges, and so on. So we didn't do school teacher training. So everybody that came in had a career beforehand, just like you, really. It had a career beforehand and come in. And I have never seen people so nervous in my life. And at first I couldn't work out what this was. And then you realize that they were really nervous about coming back into an institution of higher education.
Imposter syndrome.
And they thought, I don't know anything. I know nothing. And I used to say to them, what do you mean you don't know anything? Well, I don't, do I? Yes, you do. You're a twin career professional now. You've got all your professional career and you're now changing career. So it's not that you don't know anything. It's just that you've come here presumably to find out how to teach it and how to be effective. But we used to spend ages doing that. But we all, if you were switched on right, you could learn an awful lot from, it seems strange, doesn't it, to call somebody who's 40 years old a student. But you can learn an awful lot from those people if you're willing to listen. Yeah. They've come because they think you can help them achieve something, achieve their goal, but equally you can learn a heck of a lot from them. And in those days, we also used to do the nurses. The nurses didn't have a separate teaching qualification, so they used to do hours. Well, I mean, I ended up doing night classes full of nurses, 20-odd nurses in the classroom. And, you talk about kind of an imposter syndrome, don't you? I'm thinking, gosh, these are all nurses. These are all well qualified. This is in the days before they had to do degrees. And these are all professional people. I need to be careful what I'm saying. And the nervousness was the other way, but they were putting me at ease, saying, Andy, stop it. We're not here to learn about injections or anything. Tell us about how to, we've got to teach this. Tell us about how to teach it. We want to learn from you. So what I'm trying to say is, to me, it's a two-way thing. I mean, I mean, you've come in, Lyndsey, having had a previous career, and you probably don't fully understand yet that you've got a lot to contribute to your fellow students and the staff that you come into contact with in Bolton. But I think that's the way we need to look at it. And, even when you get undergraduates at the age of 18, they're coming in with something.
Yep.
They're actually adults. And I think it's the way we embrace them, engage with them, and help. It should be a two-way street, really, because
I really do think that's what Bolton is very, very good at.
Yes,
is the accessibility of academics. It's the fact that you can just have those water cooler conversations with academics, and they don't just sort of brush you off with just, hi, yes, I'm fine. You have some serious conversations. I know that's what drew me to the University of Bolton from my very first open day. In comparison to other local places, I didn't feel that close community. I didn't feel like my voice would ever matter. And you just get that sense at Bolton.
And it's the way of talking to people, isn't it? If you were to come into somewhere like Bolton and the first thing you meet is somebody says, hello, I'm Doctor or Professor this, straight away you've put that barrier up, because it is a barrier. What does it matter? Who's actually interested in that? You have a name, and the idea is to put somebody at ease. Somebody's coming in on an open day that's not quite sure, and somebody's got to break the ice and allow them to express their thoughts so that you can help them make a decision. We've always prided ourselves on that at Bolton. I mean, there are many. When I was actually lecturing, you wouldn't get a lunch break. So much so that one of my groups of students at the end of the year bought me a bellhop that's on a hotel disc that you ring to get. They bought me one of those because with the office where I was, they used to be queuing down the corridor and outside to get 5 minutes. Now, this was in addition to tutorial times, and this was in addition. What we used to say to them was, if I'm in the building and I'm not teaching, you can come and I'll spend whatever time I want with you. But I said, the only condition is that if it's lunchtime, You have to put up with me eating and having a drink while I'm talking to you. So it used to become a joke. One person had finished and we used to leave and say, next. And it was done in a pleasant way. It wasn't done in like a patronage. It was just next. It became a running joke. So at the end of the year, they said, look, instead of shouting next, just ring the bell and the next one can come in. And so but that's what Bolton is like, or used to be like. It's more difficult now for the staff to do that because of the way the timetable. But that's the kind of thing that we always used to do. And people used to get such added value out of that, because instead of waiting for a tutorial, somebody would say 5 minutes, just 5 minutes. What is this? And you'd say, it's that. Brilliant, thank you. And off they'd go. So they could carry on with their assignment. And that, I'd like to think that's what we're still like now. I mean, I still carry it through now. If somebody calls into the building where I am in normal times, I'll talk to them and I won't draw breath. So I have to consciously stop.
I think maybe we need that bell these days.
Yeah.
What was I going to say then? So thinking about that, I think you're absolutely right. I think that's what Bolton's strength is. But how is COVID going to impact on that? Because you're not really able to be on campus and be in close quarters with people. So everything has had to move online, and kind of the essence of what Bolton is will it change? Will it go back? Will we stream through?
I think COVID's an aberration. I think there's got to come a point when the country has to decide that the virus that causes it is never going to go away. It's going to be there in the world forever and a day, just like measles, chicken pox, you name it, it's there. So we have to find a way of managing that. So it has been a tough 2 years, but it will come back to normality where we can meet up with people, talk to people face to face. I'm convinced of that, because if we carry on as we are, there's no hope. We'll destroy society, the economy will collapse, etc. I think at the moment what we've been trying to do, and what my colleagues have been trying to do, is use the technology as best we can, Zoom, telephone, whatever, to try and stay in touch with people. And I can't see anything else we can do, really. And you're right, it isn't the same, because it feels as though there's a barrier. Using Zoom doesn't feel right or normal. But again, the onus really... Sorry, say again, Lynn.
Sorry, there's benefits. There's definitely benefits to Zoom. I was talking the other day to somebody about lectures. If I was sat in the Dean Lecture Theatre with, full of psychology students, very, very rarely would I ever put my hand up and say anything. And now I have no issue necessarily with confidence that way. Yeah. I just didn't feel I could. Whereas I could be sat on a Zoom lecture with 50 people more, and I would talk or I would ask questions more, because it felt like it was just me and that lecturer, because I couldn't necessarily see everybody else, or they weren't real. I found I could engage more, and I actually did engage more. So I do think there are benefits.
I can understand that, and I can see that, but I'd put the alternative view there, that going back to my days, we used to deliver lectures to 200 people at a time, and we actually used to interact with them.
Yes.
And I think it's the way that the lecturer, whatever, sets their stall out for what are they up for, and I think it's the way that I think it can be done in real life. I agree with your point about Zoom. It is easier to interact because there's only me in this room here, and there's nobody immediately looking at me to make me feel embarrassed if I ask a stupid question.
Yeah.
And that's interesting, a stupid question. There is no such thing as a stupid question. It's just a question. And that's often forgotten.
Thinking it.
Yeah, but you can do that live in a lecture theatre. You can get that across by, making sure that you're reacting the right way to people. Because it's about building individual confidence, isn't it? That people have to feel confident dealing with people in groups, because life isn't going to revolve around this technology. It's going to revolve around real people. So I think it can be done, but it takes an awful lot of investment to get that group of people in a lecture theatre to feel comfortable in asking a question.
Oh yeah, you're definitely right. Depending on the dynamics of the lecture, I know myself which ones I would engage with far more in comparison, and it was the kind of characters.
Well, Yeah, it is the character, but it's also, I used to run a little sketch, I used to get them all together. The first thing I used to do in the lecture theatre was ask people, how many of you think you're experts? And you'd get, they'd all had a career before, so you'd put your hand up. So out of 200 people, you may get 150 people put their hands up. So I used to do this little play acting, pacing across the front with my head down, going, oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. Well, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Now, eventually, after a couple of minutes, somebody in the audience would say, Andy, what's wrong? Why have we upset you? I've said, well, there's 150 experts in the room. There's nothing I can do. What am I going to do about this? There's nothing I can do to help. Or I didn't expect this. And then slowly but surely the penny would drop and people would, no, hang on a minute, hang on. No. By expert, we thought you meant this. So 150 people had a different definition of expert. So I think that it's a nice icebreaker, isn't it? That the person at the front is no more an expert than the person in the audience. It's just that generally the lecturers know the way through the subject matter. They've done research in an area, so they're able to explain their research, what this means for you as students. But expert means there's nothing else to learn. Now, all my colleagues would say, no, I've got a lot to learn. I'm learning all the time. I'm learning from interacting with students. I'm learning from doing research. Yeah, exactly. So, that's the kind of, I don't know, it's helpful way of thinking about things, really. Yeah. And sometimes as students, they look at the lecture at the front and they think, that must be an expert.
Yeah.
No, it's somebody who's achieved through, as you say, hard work, qualifications and standing, and may have published papers and doing research, but there's still a lot to know, because if we were all experts, there's no need for universities to do research.
Yeah, you're right. So, yeah, you're right.
So I don't know whether that helps. And then my educational career, if you want me to finish that, when I was in Bolton.
No, I was just going to say we need to go back because, well, we haven't found, we've left you with an undergraduate degree and that's it.
Yeah, well, that's it. And then I went into industry, then I went into college, and at the colleges I came back and did a part-time teacher training qualification. And then when I came into HE, Bolton Institute of Higher Education as it was then, I then did my master's degree. And then following on from that, many years later, I did a part-time doctorate, but at Manchester University. So that's kind of swiftly how I went through everything.
How did you find your master's in comparison to your undergraduate?
Difficult to explain, really, because my undergraduate degree was electrical electronic engineering, so very specifically focused on a subject, and my master's degree was a master's in education, looking
so it's like at apples and oranges, that really, isn't it?
Really, yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, I was looking at quality systems being used in further education. So there is a link with engineering, because at the time they were trying to use industrial quality models in further education. So there was an interest there, but it was very different. I'm one of the fortunate people. I've always been able to write well. So, you go from an engineering degree where it's more mathematical, circuit design, that kind of thing, some writing. And then you come to a master's degree that's entirely writing, conceptual frameworks and that kind of stuff. So it is very different. But I was lucky that I've always been able to write well. So it was a stretch in terms of the subject matter that I needed to get to grips with, the reading material and so on. But in terms of writing, it wasn't that difficult, if I'm being honest. But that comes with maturity anyway, doesn't it? It comes with your journey through education anyway. That's something that develops, it's a lot of first year undergrads are terrified of writing that third year dissertation. But by the time they get to that dissertation with a bit of supervision, they can do it well. So
yeah. How did you end up choosing to do a PhD?
Well, I didn't. Mine's actually an educational doctorate. Mine's actually a Doctor of Education, which is a professional doctorate. So it's slightly different. It's more, it's the same end point. It's doctoral level study, a thesis and a viva and all of that, but it's more applied. So how did I come to do that? I don't know, really. It's something I'd toyed with. Once I became the head of education in 2001, and then had management positions ever since then, different ones. And I suppose it got to the point where I thought, yeah, really, I'd like to have a doctorate. I am interested in this. But one of the areas that had developed into my interest when I became a manager first was the workload management of staff and how it's linked to the performance management of staff. Because I'd always believed in performance management when I became a head of department. I can remember when I was interviewed for that, what's the one thing that will get people running to my door? The ex-head of HR said, and I said, easy, I believe in performance management. Oh, what do you mean? Because everybody thinks of the negative side of performance management. It's not necessarily negative. So I decided that I'd got a lot of experience in this and wanted to pursue that at doctoral level. And that's what I did. With good support at Manchester from a supervisor at Manchester who was outstanding. And yeah, that's why I did it. And I find out that in the literature, workload and performance management, there's no literature linking the two together. When in fact there must be, my head was they must be linked up somehow.
Yeah, it would make sense.
Yeah, but anyway, so that's really, in a simplified terms, that's how I got into doing a doctorate.
So thinking about that 15-year-old boy sat with the careers lady.
Would I have thought I'd get to that? No, never. If I'm being honest with you, at the age of 15, I hadn't got a clue what a doctorate was.
No.
I wouldn't have known. It wasn't, the horizon at that point as a 15-year-old in a good state comprehensive school was going to university, and that meant a degree. And I didn't know what a doctorate was, a PhD or anything. It wasn't that. You used to see it pop up on television on Horizon. When I used to watch Horizon, Professor this and Doctor that, and you thought, well, I wonder what that means. But you never got into it. You know what I mean? So it wouldn't have entered my head at that point. Was it something that I was aiming for at the age of 15, which might be the other side of your question? No, it wasn't. No. Not at all. No.
The fields are completely different as well, aren't they? Thinking about engineering in comparison to where you are.
Well, you see, there is another thing that if I had my time again, I wouldn't have done engineering. I would have pursued languages.
Interesting. Why?
I didn't realise it at the time, but in school in those days, years 1, 2, and 3 were the pre-O-level years, and then years 4 and 5 were the O-level years.
Yeah.
And in year 3, I studied French and Spanish. So year 1, you studied one language, which was French. Years 2 and 3, you could opt for another language, French, and I did Spanish. And I was taught by the head of languages at the school. And I have to say the language teachers we had were excellent. And he said at one parents' evening to my parents, it's a great pity he isn't pursuing languages because he has a natural ability. Now, I didn't think anything. I just shrugged it off at that point. Yes, but I'm dropping Spanish and I'm going to pick up technical drawing and I'm, and you go through life, don't you, later on? And, my wife's Bulgarian and there's a lot of history there about how did I meet her, and it was on a consultancy from Bolton in Bulgaria, several consultancies. Anyway, it's a long story. That's a separate podcast altogether. But while I was on one of these consultancies, one Saturday afternoon with the lead consultant that was over there, who's an English guy, we went around all the museums in Sofia, and I actually learned the Cyrillic alphabet.
Wow.
And I can now read Cyrillic, Bulgarian Cyrillic. I can get by in Bulgarian, but I'm okay. I can read menus, no problem. I can, go into a hardware store, read what things are, And my wife has said to me that because she speaks Bulgarian, Russian, German, and we've been to Germany and I've had no training in German or anything, and she hasn't taught me. But I can converse in German, basic German. And she says, do you realise you've got an ability in languages?
Yeah.
And she's only the second person. And really, looking at it now, I wish that's what I'd pursued. What I didn't tell you was at the end of my degree, when I decided I'd had enough of Granada, I was actually offered a job working for the EBU in Luxembourg. And I turned it.
No.
And the guy interviewed me over the telephone. And and said, do you want to come out and have a look round? But you've got the job. So no, I don't think so. And when you look back on life, you realise, don't you, that there's opportunities that I wish I'd done things differently, really, but there we are. That's the way it goes.
It's really interesting thinking about what was it at the time in school why you didn't take the advice of that teacher, or you didn't think about it any further. Is it because, I'm not just thinking about you as in general, just as maybe children, we already have our mindset, we already know what we want to do. Is it not as attractive to them? I wonder what that would be.
I don't really know what it's like now in schools, but in those days, I think there was a lot of concentration on schools were about education, but ultimately with a view to being employed.
Yeah.
And I think
languages feels like it might have been a bit weak. It's a bit of almost like you're just doing drama, which is just something that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's I think my parents thought, yeah, languages, but where's that going to get you? They never said that to me, but I think that was always there. Do you know what I mean? If you spool on now, I mean, my daughter's in her second year at university and she's doing physical geography, and my mum, bless her, she still says occasionally, well, what jobs can you get with that? And my attitude has changed completely, I'm afraid. So my attitude now is education. You follow what you want to do. You've done it. You followed what you want to do. And I think now I'm more of that view. You follow what you want to do, what you're interested in, where your heart, not simply functional. Now, that's not for everybody, is it? That's my view, and that's what I think. But there are still lots of people that say, no, education is functional. It's to get you into the world of work. That's fine. I can see where those people are coming from, but I think now, having seen both sides of it, I think it's a case of, okay, yeah, do it while you can, follow what you can do, and people come to that at different stages in their life, don't they? It's,
you never know where anything's going to take you. And I think for me, long gone are the days where you have to choose. Like, my son's 13, he's in his second year at high school, he goes into his third year, which is, or year 9, which is notoriously your options year, isn't it?
That's right.
I remember choosing my options when I was 13, and I chose French and German because I wanted to be an air hostess. Why? Because I thought it was glamorous when I got to go to different countries. What a ridiculous time to choose your options. I don't feel like at that age you know really what you want to do. Look at me, I was 38 and dropped a career and came back into education. And I do think long gone are the days where you've got a career and that's it for life. You really can change at any time, and I completely buy into the education.
But what's expected? Somebody at 13, they are falling back on the people that can advise them. Now, this is
sitting with that lady. You at least had an idea. Yeah. Imagine somebody else who sits there and says, I don't know, and you go down the path of, well, I don't know, I'll go and cut people's hair, for example, or whatever, just because you're kind of being told that because there's no other options.
Well, this is the thing, isn't it? We always say now in HE that one of the problems we face when you're trying to recruit students onto undergraduate programs is you're dealing not necessarily directly with the undergrad student that wants to come in, but you're dealing with the people who are influencing them. Yes. So that's the teachers at school, that's the parents, and it's very difficult to get into that cycle of how do you get to those people? Say, look, these are the opportunities available. Yeah. I remember once, it's a bit of an anecdote this, but when I was in FE, we did an open evening, and a father came along with his son saying, I'm not really sure. And this guy's father, it turns out, was a toolmaker. So I was able to, my dad's a toolmaker. Yeah. And he'd gone through almost the same route my dad had gone through. But he said, I'm not sure what's available now. So I said, well, if you don't mind, can I talk to your son and you just listen in? Mm-hmm. So I was chatting to his son, what are you doing at school? What are you likely to get with? Well, you could do this, the OND. And I can remember the father, do you still do that? Is that still available? I said, yeah, of course it is. I said, and in my view, it's excellent. It's not the route I went. I went down A levels, but I said, given my time again, I think I would have gone down the OND route. It's very good. I didn't know that was available. Go on, tell us more about that. Anyway, in the end, this lad did come on the OND and he did very well. But, you know, as you said, you know, it's a struggle as a parent knowing where to get the information to give the advice that your kids want.
There's no one size that fits all, is there, with education?
No.
And I don't think there's a normal traditional route anymore. And I do think we're starting to accept that a little bit more. That,
yes.
You know, like I say, my son's 13. I want him to do what makes him happy. I'm not pushing him in any direction. He's seen me in a career, and he's also seen me doing education. He does not want to come to university right now, but he might change his mind. You know, I don't believe that we should be. I think we should be guiding our children and giving them options, but not pushing them in directions.
I think you're right. I think it's about guidance and support, isn't it? If you push people down a route, I don't think that works. I'm a firm believer in that. If you push somebody into something, it will not work. I think guidance and support. I mean, I was fortunate, I suppose, not everybody can do this, but my daughter had to do various work experience days. So the University of Bolton were excellent. You know, I got clearance for her to come in, and she sat in on a validation panel that I was chairing. It was actually a nursing validation panel. And we had the professional body with us, the Nursing and Midwifery Council, and it had been cleared with them. Because this is, you know, a validation panel is serious enough, but when you've got the professional body there who have the final say, but they welcomed it. And what's more, they allowed her to ask questions.
Really?
Yes. And, you know, and she said, well, I'd like to ask, you know, in the break, I'd like to ask this question because I don't understand this. Now, everybody on the panel knew they could have answered that for her. But the Nursing and Midwifery Council, that's a good question, Alex. When they come back in, you ask them that question. Yes.
Oh.
So, and the staff at the university were equally brilliant. They took her question seriously and they answered her properly. They didn't patronize her at all. So, and there's other things that have happened where she's been in the university. She's experienced things at university. So for her, kind of, I've seen a university. I know what a university is. I think it's where I want to go.
Yeah.
I'd never told her to go. But when she's been at university, she's been very comfortable with it because she knows a little bit of the language. She knows her way around. Yeah. You know, we were talking about referencing before. And she's got people coming to her asking her about referencing.
I'll ring her up later.
Yeah, because but I've drummed that into her throughout her A-levels, referencing how to do it and, you know, what software to use to do it and everything. So, but that's not been in a pushy way. That's been in a guiding, supporting way. You know, Dad, I need to do this. What do I do? So you show her, and that's what you'll be doing with your son. You know, you guide, support. And yeah, let people make their own decisions, really. That's all we can do, isn't it?
Yeah.
And as universities, though, we have to be open to people. We have to be willing to talk to people, you know, and not put barriers up with, you know, necessarily with titles or anything. Just talk to them, you know, have a conversation.
I think than talking is listening. That's why we've got 2 ears and 1 mouth.
Yeah, well, that's the old truism, isn't it? That's right. Yeah, but you do, don't you? If somebody comes in, they're not sure what they want to do, until you've listened to them and just asked some gentle questions to get the full background, you can't offer any advice or guidance.
No, I agree.
But it's, yeah.
So where do we find your next path? What's going to happen next with your education? Because every day is a learning day.
Well, it's strange, isn't it? I think formal education for me is finished now. I've got the doctorate and that's it. I don't see myself actually as a researcher, but I'm interested in it. And the job I'm in now, I'm fortunate that I get to work with lots of colleagues in the university who are doing research at all different levels. And that interests me greatly, and how I can support them. I think I'm at the stage of my career now where, you know, maybe I'm not looking to go necessarily further at this stage, although, you know, I'm open to things. But I do like what I'm doing. I do like, you know, dealing with the colleagues and the students. Sorry?
Guiding.
Yeah, I do. It's great to talk to, you know, I talk now mostly to doctoral students, usually when they've got a problem that, you know, they need some help with, and it's great. I enjoy it. That's the really great part of the job, talking to the students, finding out what they're doing. I'm trying to support the Postgraduate Research Student Society for that reason, that, you know, I want that student body to be enthused and do well. But I'm lucky that I get to interact with every school in the university about every different piece of research. One day I'll be talking to colleagues in Islamic finance, and that's always a learning curve. And I think in the job I've got, that's what makes it. I am genuinely interested in things. So, that's the best answer I can give you to that, really, Lyndsey, at the moment.
I think that's a good answer.
Good.
That's a really good answer. So I think last question then, what advice would you give to students who are perhaps embarking on their university educational journey?
What, right at the outset, from degree level?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know.
Would your advice be different for different levels?
I think it'd have to be because your goals are different at different levels, aren't they? I mean, when you've come from college or school, and let's talk about because it gets more complicated. Let's talk about the traditional 18-year-old coming in. You're coming into university, and it does phase people a little bit because it's not school. It's very different. You've got more freedom. It isn't school. And I think it can be very daunting. And I think what I'd say to those people is, don't let it be. You are not meant to know the answers to things. That's why every university has student counsellors, student support services, welfare services, libraries, librarians, academic staff. Those people are there to help you with your studies. And I would say never stop asking questions. I would say the big thing about coming to university is ask the questions, because by asking the questions, people will then know that there's something you don't quite understand and they'll be able to explain. I would say the best thing you can do is come into university with an open mind, be positive, take your studies seriously, but have a good work-life balance with that. But ask questions and use the human resource as much as the physical resource. People forget that you go into a library and actually our librarians can offer a lot of first-line guidance on the subject. So, that would be my advice, really, without getting too heavy about it. I think for those that come in that are more mature, I think we have to recognise that actually they're probably more trepidatious than the 18-year-olds, because very often they've been away from education and they come back with the last experience still in their head, and it may not have been a good one. And I think, again, though, the advice there is really the same. Talk to people and recognize that you've got stuff to offer, in terms of your previous life experience. So it's slightly different advice there at that level. When we get to master's level, it's different again, because people have got a degree. They're doing the masters for a different reason. They're more educationally confident. So usually there, it's about learning to interact with the academic staff more, questioning still, but it's interacting more as an equal. Once you get to doctorate level, of course, I think people should be taking doctoral students as an equal, rather than, yes, they are a student that needs guidance and support, but they have got previous experience to offer. So in a nutshell, that's the kind of the way I'd go, really, with that. There's a lot of people who disagree with me. I've said for a long time that it doesn't matter who you are, whether you're an 18-year-old or a 50-year-old coming into education. I see lots of similarities in the needs that those people have that are born out of what I'd call lack of confidence, maybe, in coming into this new setting, because university has a cachet, doesn't it? People have got their own view of what a university is, and some of the views are born out of watching Morse and Oxford. It's not actually right, if you follow me. So that's what I'd say, Lyndsey, to that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think your advice does differ, but there are some similarities throughout, isn't there, that I've read through?
Yeah. I think it's about questioning. I think it's about asking. There is nothing wrong with asking a question. I mean, one thing, from a very young age, one of the books my dad had, first book he was bought, was an encyclopedia, and in the front there was a verse from Rudyard Kipling, Just So Stories. And remember, my dad was an engineer. He wasn't a great poet or, a reader. It's the only bit of poetry that he knew. Okay. And I'll probably get some of the words muddled up, but it's from a Just So story. I think it's called The Elephant's Child. And it's one of the verses. And it goes, I keep 6 honest serving men. Remember, that's how it was written in 18 something. I keep 6 honest serving men. They taught me all I knew. Their names are what and why and when and how and where and who. Now, I think if you get that into your head, if you think about it, those questions they're every question you want to ask. And so much so that actually appeared at the front of my thesis.
Wow, yeah.
Because it's the one, it hasn't guided me, that's too grand, but it's the one thing that I remember him saying to me repeatedly as a child, often in jest, but it stuck with me right into adulthood.
Ask questions.
And I thought, he doesn't know what service he did to me there, really. But so that's why questions to me are, we only learn by questioning things.
Yeah, we do. Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
That's what I think is a great ending. Always question things.
Yeah, always question things. Yeah.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you so much for giving up your time today to talk.
It's a pleasure, Lyndsey. It's a pleasure.
Just going to press stop on the recording. So thank you very much. Just one second.
Thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.